Nietzsche devised a psychological trap so severe it forces you to face the ultimate terrifying question. If a demon crept into your loneliest loneliness and told you that you must live this exact life again, down to every failure, heartbreak, and mundane hour, over and over for eternity, would you throw yourself down and gnash your teeth? Or would you call that demon a god? This is not a physics problem, nor is it a mystical prophecy about the literal reincarnation of your soul. It is the doctrine of eternal recurrence, introduced in the gay science, and it serves as the most brutal, unforgiving psychological mirror ever constructed by a philosopher. You are at a point in your life where the bulk of the canvas is already painted. The major decisions have been made. You have marriages, divorces, career paths taken, investments lost, and words you can never unsay. When you are 20, this thought experiment is merely an abstract puzzle. When you are 55, 65, or older, it is a heavy, suffocating weight. It demands to know whether you are living a life of quiet desperation, hoping the past could be surgically altered, or if you can stand firmly in the present and claim total ownership of your history. The real genius of this concept is how it weaponizes the concept of eternity. It forces you to look at the exact reality of your Tuesday morning, your chronic back pain, or the silent distance between you and a family member, and demands that you accept it as a permanent, repeating loop. There is no escape hatch. There is no next time I'll do it better. There is only this. The mechanism relies on forcing the mind to grapple with an absolute, unchangeable permanence. To understand why Nietzsche's formulation is so radical, you have to understand the historical machinery it was meant to replace. For millennia, institutions of authority have understood that the most efficient way to enforce human compliance is through a permanent, unverifiable threat. Look at the architecture of historical religious doctrine. The concept of hell, eternal conscious torment, was the ultimate lever of behavioral control. Picture a 16th century tradesman. He is exhausted, impoverished, and struggling to feed his children. Yet, he willingly hands over his meager savings to the church to buy indulgences. Why? Because the institution has successfully implanted a permanent, unverifiable threat into his mind. He cannot prove hell exists, but the mere possibility of infinite suffering overrides his immediate, earthly reality. The fear paralyzes his critical thinking and extracts his total obedience. No earthly king or warlord can wield that kind of power. An earthly king can only threaten your physical body, a finite consequence. The historical doctrine of eternal damnation bypassed the physical world entirely, turning the human imagination into a self-policing prison. The genius of the threat is precisely that it cannot be tested until you are dead, meaning you must remain compliant for your entire waking life. Personally, I think this is where Nietzsche actually outmaneuvered the theologians of his time. By moving the ultimate eternal consequence from a mythical, post-mortem afterlife directly into this exact earthly life, he stripped away the comforting illusion of a clean slate. You can no longer just endure a miserable earthly existence while praying for a paradise later. You are suddenly forced to justify and validate the very life you are breathing right now. But if you believe that secular, modern society has abandoned this mechanism of unverifiable, permanent fear, you are gravely mistaken. The doctrine of hell may have lost its grip on the modern secular consciousness, but the psychological structure remains completely intact. The systems of control merely change their branding. Today, we are managed by secular equivalents of the exact same mechanism. Systems that keep you compliant through threats of permanent, unprovable ruin rather than actual, enforced consequences. Look at the modern corporate structure. The entirety of the middle-class grind is built on the unverifiable threat of total destitution in your final years. You are told that if you do not sacrifice the best, most vital decades of your life to a cubicle or a factory floor, you will face the permanent, inescapable hell of dying broke and alone. It operates identically to the historical threat. It demands total compliance today in exchange for a theoretical safety tomorrow, leveraging a fear you cannot verify until it is too late. You see the same structure in modern social dynamics and cancel culture. The permanent threat of total reputation destruction, of being exiled, deemed unemployable, and stripped of your social standing, keeps millions of men biting their tongues, nodding along to absurdities, and policing their own thoughts. The threat of social exile is our modern excommunication. You are kept in line not by a physical enforcer at your door, but by the phantom terror of permanent ruin. This is why Nietzsche called eternal recurrence the heaviest burden. He saw that humanity was constantly giving away its power to these external threats, constantly trying to escape the present moment. We either look to a religious afterlife to validate our suffering, or we look to a secular retirement to finally start living. Both are evasions. Both are a refusal to look at the present day and say, "This is enough." When you apply the test of eternal recurrence, you stop looking for external salvation and you are forced to confront the internal reality of your own regrets. Regret is fundamentally a rejection of reality. It is an arrogant assumption that you somehow had the wisdom you possess now, back when you were making the mistakes that gave you that wisdom. You look back at a failed business venture or a marriage that ended in ruin, and the natural human instinct is to wish it away. We tell ourselves that if we could just surgically remove that one terrible decade, our lives would be a masterpiece. But the demon of the eternal return does not allow for a la carte living. You cannot select the victories and leave the defeats on the table. You must swallow the entire bitter pill, over and over, forever. Now, here's my take on why the vast majority of people fail this specific test. We are deeply addicted to the comfort of our own victimhood. I find that it's immensely soothing to believe our lives were knocked off course by bad luck, a bad economy, or toxic people. Because if we accept that every single step was part of our necessary path, we have to carry the crushing weight of total, uncompromising responsibility. To say yes to the demon is to practice amor fati, the love of one's fate. But this is where the concept requires absolute intellectual rigor. Nietzsche is not asking you to become a delusional optimist. He is not asking you to smile at the memory of burying a loved one, or to pretend that a betrayal didn't gut you emotionally. He is asking you to recognize the unbreakable spiderweb of causality. Every event in your life is inextricably linked to every other event. The strength you possess today, the quiet stoicism you have developed in your older years, the clarity with which you now see the world, none of these traits were handed to you in a vacuum. They were forged in the exact fires you wish you could extinguish. If you pluck one thread from the web, the entire structure collapses. If you erase the humiliating failure of your 30s, you also erase the humility and financial discipline it forced you to learn in your 40s. You cannot amputate the cause while expecting to keep the effect. Therefore, to affirm who you are today, you must retroactively affirm everything that built you. You must look at the tragedy, the betrayal, and the loss, and say, "Thus I willed it." Look, speaking purely for myself, there are years of my own life I would pay cash to permanently forget. But when I actually hold my feet to the fire of this thought experiment, I realize that erasing those humiliating, painful chapters would strip away the exact resilience I rely on to survive today. You simply cannot separate the gold from the crushing pressure that formed it. This brings us to the ultimate utility of the eternal recurrence. Once you understand this philosophy, your vision clears. You develop an immediate, razor-sharp ability to tell the difference between a threat designed to control you and a real consequence worth heeding. When an external system, whether it is a religious institution threatening your immortal soul or a corporate structure threatening your social survival, uses a permanent, unverifiable fear to demand your obedience, you recognize it for what it is, a lever of control. They are trying to extract your life energy by promising you safety in a future you can never verify. They want you to trade your tangible present for an invisible tomorrow. But the eternal recurrence is an internal consequence. It does not demand your money, your compliance, or your silence. It demands your authenticity. The real consequence worth heeding is the danger of reaching the end of your life and realizing you played a role assigned to you by someone else, terrified of invisible threats, only to be faced with the horrifying prospect of repeating that cowardice for eternity. The systems of the world use unverifiable threats to make you a slave to their rules. Nietzsche uses the unverifiable threat of eternity to make you the absolute master of your own. Tell me where I'm wrong. Comment section is open, and I read every one of them. Subscribe if this actually made you think. Philosophy every week. No fluff, no motivation posters.